Do you remember Heselton's lumber yard?
Pardon?
Do you remember Heselton's lumber operation?
Oh, I certainly do. That was my uncle.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Uncle Walter.
What do you remember about it? I don't remember it.
He had a sawmill that he could transport. And he went all over with it. You know, they'd set up a sawmill and they'd cut out that lot. And my brother started working for him when he was 16 years old. And it was a very hard working life. And, but he made out very well. And they also, he had a mill right over where the town shed is.
Yeah.
They had a mill in there at one time, and it was,
Was that run by them or by someone else?
pardon?
Was that mill also run by Walt
My
Heselton?
uncle.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he had quite a few workers. And some of the trees were huge. We've got a picture with my brother and my uncle that they had cut this huge, huge tree.
Mhm.
And it must have been really old. I was born on West Road, and the house that I was born in it was burned, and other people have it now. It was on the corner of Deer Valley Road, and I was born in 1925. And then we moved down to where I live now in 1929. And I've always been on that road, and my folks, my father came, his mother and father were living in Hillsborough, and my grandmother came over to my great-grandmother's house for a visit, and they had a huge snowstorm, and she was gonna have the baby, so they had to take a sleigh over to Hillsborough and get the doctor and bring the doctor over. So my dad was also born in Bradford. My mother was born in Bradford. All my brothers, my sister, and we all went to that little school. Mom went to the pond school at one time, and she used to walk down the road, and she used to go down to the lake, and Mrs. Stevens had a store. So she would be so tired, my mother would help her add up the figures at the end of the day, because she was so tired she just couldn't do it. And Mom used to walk, and in those days there was no trees, hardly any trees. The trees were only the outlines of your property usually. Where the stone walls were, you'd see a few trees. There wasn't enough really for firewood. And when I got married and went away, I came back and I said, oh my word, this don't look like home anymore. It's all grown up. You know, it was small, shrubby stuff. But my grandfather came to live with Mom and Dad, and he used to clean all the walls, and he would burn all that poison ivy, everything. He'd clean it, and the walls, everything was beautiful.
Oh.
Then one day, I don't know who was in charge, but somebody came up to him. They came up, they said, you can't burn fire like this. And he said, well, why not? He said, because people go by and it's not legal. You can't do that anymore. We're gonna put you in jail if you do it. So my grandfather was so hurt because he'd been doing that for years and years and keeping it so neat. And then it all had to grow up. Couldn't do it. Because they didn't have trucks or anything to transport all that brush and stuff. So it just grew up like it is today.
Do you remember the hurricane of 38? Either of
I
you?
certainly do.
I certainly do.
What
I
happened?
certainly do.
Oh, the-
My father wouldn't go to bed, and the neighbors came over, two little girls, it was my cousin, and we had all we could do with the folks to close the front door. It was a big heavy door, but the wind was so strong, so they only lived in a little house down the road, so they came over to our house, and we're inside the house, you know, when it was getting late, Mom said, well, everybody's gotta go to bed. My father says, well, I'm not going to bed. And she says, well, you won't fool, she said. This old house never blew down, and I don't think it's gonna blow down now. So we went to bed. The next morning, Mom got up, she says, oh my Lord, I never saw anything like this. It was holes in the road that you could drive a car into, or set a car in. The dirt was gone, the trees were down. I think it was 2 weeks before we could walk to the center.
Wow.
You were just stuck there, but of course, we didn't have electricity, we didn't have running water, so it didn't really bother us. The old house was there,
Cable wasn't out, no internet.
the house was still there, the trees.
It's like now, my house, the same idea. And well, at the casino, they have a beautiful grove of pines, and they were all down. And after the hurricane was over, my cousin was living with us, and we took the saw and the axe and we chopped our way to Henniker. And I do mean chopped our way, because there was no road at all. I mean, there was a road, but there was no, couldn't go over them.
Well, that Henniker Road was a road
Oh,
out of, I don't know where. We used to go like, when Dad had the car, we would go to Henniker probably once in 2 weeks to shop. And it would take probably 2 hours to get to Henniker. Because the road was little winding,
yeah.
winding
Yeah.
roads, just a little narrow road. You couldn't really pass 2 cars. You had to pull over.
oh, yeah. Oh, is it what we,
Do you have any idea how high the winds were in the hurricane of 38, or how much rainfall there was in inches?
okay, in the 38 hurricane, I don't know, you people have ever been in the casino? They had a dance floor, and on the dance floor there was a place where the orchestra sat. They were, about probably 18 inches up, and my cousin and I took a canoe and we paddled it down from the house down the brook into the casino, and we ducked under the timbers, and as I say, there was the floor, if you know where the casino heights down, and about 18 inches where the orchestra was, and the piano was stuck out that much out of water. That's how much. Well, it was terrible, terrible. Washed everybody's house up. We couldn't get out of our house. The same idea.
What kind of saws did you use to cut the trees that were on the road and in the way?
Pull, that's all I can remember. Pull, don't push.
Crosscut.
That's all. Yeah. I don't forget my hand now.
Was it a two-person saw?
Huh?
Two-person
Oh
saw?
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Oh, I know my dad used to say, pull, damn it, don't push, pull, pull. And you talk about Helen, remind me of a story, tale up there. You all know, probably know where Helen lives. Go to Bradford Center, and after you go by their house, there's a road that goes to East Washington, but there's a bad curve up there. And the Shaddocks used to live right on the corner there. They had a dirt floor. I used to paddle around with George Shattuck. He was my age, and and they had a dirt floor, and I mean, just nothing. They had rugs out, but there was no wood under it. And Mrs. Shattuck had broke her leg, and they had a hen that was setting on eggs, it was called, what do you call it, broody? No.
Yeah.
Well, they
Broody.
break up, they stop, just disgusted, I guess, and so they took the eggs from underneath the chicken and put them in bed with Mrs. Shattuck, and she hatched the eggs.
That's a great story.
I didn't go to Shattuck's.
Well, I used to pal with George,
Mhm.
and, but it was quite a house they lived in.
He's the one that cut my fingers off.
Yeah.
Oh.
I was only a little girl, I was 2, I wasn't 3 yet. And Mom, this lady came down with her son, and Mrs. Shattuck came down with her 2 sons, or 3 sons.
That's right, yeah.
And it was springtime, and Mrs. Brown's little boy had gotten his feet wet, so his mother was giving him a licking. So my mother felt so bad for him, she went in and went upstairs to get toys or something for him to play with, because my mother never licked us like that. And in the meantime, I was out there in the shed, well, it was right joined to the house, and they had a big chopping block. And we had butternuts. I don't know if you folks know what butternuts are. They're very hard and very hard to shell. Well, the older boy was trying to break the nuts, and I was picking them up as he was dropping them, and I was putting them on the chopping block. So he decided to turn the axe around, and it came down on my hand. And that's how I lost my fingers.
How did you
So
stop
I
the
didn't-
bleeding?
I didn't associate
I bet.
too much with that.
What did your parents do about the fact that you lost this?
Well, it took, my dad was in the woods chopping wood, and when my mom went out of her mind.
Right.
They tell me. I can remember it just in parts, you know. I remember that the lady in the house, the one that had spanked the little boy, she put my hand in my mom had a wooden box in the pantry, and she thought it was sugar. So it was salt. So she put my hand in the box of salt to cauterize the blood.
Right.
And I can remember that. I'll never forget that. And then Dad came home, and Mom quieted down a little, I guess. And he borrowed my grandfather's horse and buggy, and I lived way up on the hill, and they came the back way to town, and it was mud season. And of course, the mud was up to the hubs on the wagon, so it took a long time to get to town. But I can remember that we went to Dr. Oliver's, that was our doctor. And he wasn't a surgeon, and Mrs. Milliner was a nurse, and she lived right across the street from the doctor's office. So she came over and gave me ether, so he could work on my fingers. But he bandaged my fingers and bandaged them. Then they had to bring me back. Well, I went before. I can remember coming home because I had never been outside at night to see a light in our windows, you know, the kerosene lamps. And I can remember that vividly because I had never seen that before. I'd never been out after dark. So, my grandfather was there taking care of my brothers. And I can remember Mrs. Milliner coming over, and he wrapped my fingers, and then we had to go back, I don't know how many times, and he pulled the skin right off. So then I developed lead poisoning. And so he wanted to amputate my fingers down to the joint. And Mom says no. So she hired somebody to drive her to Hillsborough. And we went to Dr. Abbott. And he says, oh, she's got blood poisoning. I don't know. You'll have to sign a paper. So Mom says, all right. So he tried to take care of my fingers. And so I still got my fingers.
And
Wow.
you sew a lot.
Yes.
You do a lot of sewing.
Yeah, well, I try to compensate.
Helen talking about the doctor, we had a fellow here, lived up in the hills up in Doc Sias.
Roe Mountain, up on Roe Mountain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you remember Doc Sias?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. He was an old doctor, he was an MD, and you name the other titles that he had. And he came from around Swampscott, Mass at one time. How he got up there, I have no idea. But if you go up to where he lives, I mean, he's long dead now, but you go up there, and he had the house, and then the barn, and the best view of the lake you could get from up there. But the barn was headed the wrong direction. The cows had a beautiful view. Well, anyhow, he could cure anybody. My dad was 32 years old, and he had some problem. I don't know. He couldn't digest anything. Something was wrong with his stomach, and so they sent my dad was bigger than I am now at the time. I mean earlier, and then my dad, they sent him home from the VA hospital in Rockland, Mass. And I said, go home and make out your get measured for the pine barks, and so he came home, and Vern Hall's father, Lester Hall, met my father on the street. She, you know, geez, Phil, you look pretty bad. You better go up and see old Doc Sias. He'll fix you up. And my father said, I'm beyond, because they can't do it in the VA hospital and have everything going. And they didn't think that Doc Sias could. So went up there, Doc Sias, and Doc Sias did this, and he put him on I don't know kind of diet, but he had certain things he had to could eat, and I used to have to go out every morning with just a regular sickle and cut grass the first thing in the morning when it was still damp, and cut grass, just regular grass, and brought it in. And my mother used to, I think she said she used to steep it. She put in a thing and boil it or whatever it was, and my father ate that, and because previously everything he ate, he just threw up, he couldn't digest it. So Doc Sias put him on a grass diet, and as I say, my dad was 32 at that age, and my dad died at 88. So,
Well, Dr. Sias used to doctor with herbs.
yeah.
Strictly herbs. He didn't doctor with pills or anything from the apothecary's shop.
Now, he was an MD, I mean, regular, passed the medical exams or whatever, say, as a regular medical doctor, but he just on herbs and stuff like that.
What-
He had a girl up there, her name was Audrey. She came from down around Lowell, and she had leukemia, and no one knew what leukemia was back in those days. Now I'm talking in the 30s, and so anyhow, they somehow say heard about Doc Sias, and so they brought Audrey up. I don't know the last name, but they brought her to live with Doc Sias and his wife, and she lived with him. And Doc Sias used to plant all this, everything. He only came into town once or twice a year, but he took, I forget what, sprayed his potatoes with a sun spray to kill the bugs.
Was it copper?
copper sulfate, yeah, I think that's what, and that Audrey ate, that copper sulfate was in the potato, which everybody ate. And last, I don't know where she, I have no idea where she is now, but after the war, she was married and had a baby.
What do you put on your grandmother's legs?
Yeah, my grandmother had ulcerated legs. Oh, I never saw them how they were just weeping. And my grandmother wore long dresses so people wouldn't see her legs. And so I went and took her up there, and he looked at her, well, it's pretty bad. He says, go down and buy yourself a couple of cabbages, or get a couple of cabbages, and take the cabbage leaves off, wrap it on, and put your stockings on, and my grandmother would be standing in the kitchen at home, and you know, think she'd wet herself, but it was her legs weeping. Before she died, her skin was better than mine. Cabbage leaves. The things that he used to do for
You said he sterilized a radiator clamp and put it in somebody?
Yeah, what?
You told me he sterilized a radiator clamp and used it in somebody's body?
Yeah.
That's gross.
Helen, I was wondering, when, in your memory, were there any businesses in Bradford Center, or were they all gone by
Yes,
then?
there
Okay.
were.
Can you tell us about Bradford Center?
Way before my time.
Yeah.
But they had a blacksmith shop. Let's see, they had all kinds of things. They
Right.
had a wagon shop where they made wagons. And Mr. Hoyt had a shop right on the corner there where the barn is. Oh, where there's no barn now, they built the property out.
Mhm.
And
What was
that
his
a-
shop?
That was a shop.
For general goods, or don't, you weren't, this is before your time.
That's
So
before my time.
there were no businesses?
Well, I can vaguely remember something there
Mm-hmm.
when I was a little girl. But they had all kinds of things, and the town hall, of course, was up in the center. And they moved part of that down here. And let's see,
Helen, can you tell us about the peddlers that brought fish and meat around?
pardon?
Can you talk about the peddlers that came?
Oh, yes, even, well, of course, that was in hard times, and they would travel, these peddlers would travel for miles and miles, and they had tramp houses. And, when I was a little girl, they had tramp houses every so far, and the town would furnish a certain amount of food for them, I think even coffee or tea. And, they'd have it in these little places where they could go and sleep, or it was rough, but it was something, you know, after you'd walk probably from New York, or, you know, they used to come from all over. So one of them came to my great grandmother. She lived on the East Washington Road, and one guy came there and she fed him. She always fed all they called them tramps in those days. And she would always feed them. They would peddle like needles and shoestrings and little things, snaps, maybe some thread, or, you know, things like that they could carry on their back. That's all they had, was what they carried on their back. And this one came and he says, oh, Mrs. Can I do something for you, after she had fed him? And she said, yes, you could bring in some wood for me. That would be very nice. And he was such a kind man that she felt sorry for him, so she said, well, if you would like, you can stay and help me out. I'm an old lady now, and I need help. So he stayed, he lived with her for years until he died. And he did the gardening, and it was great.
Was that controversial, having a non-related man living with her?
Well, In those days, you had to do what you had to do to survive, because there was no income, they didn't have social security, they didn't have anything. And if you were a widow, what could you do? You didn't have money to hire somebody, and so that was a godsend to her.
But there was also a wagon that went
Yes, there was a
Yeah.
wagon that
Oh,
used to
yeah.
come through.
fish and meat.
I forgot what his name was, but he used to come through and he'd have all pots and pans on the wagon. It was horse driven, and people would buy, you know, he'd go
I can't think of the name either.
all around to all the back roads, I guess, and everything. And I guess people would pay him with food too, you know, because they were all farmers, everybody had to have a garden, and that was their livelihood, and then they raised pigs, and they had cows with milk, and I remember
Chickens.
my dad and my grandfather used to have a big hay rack, and my grandpa always had horses, so he'd go gather the hay, and I would get up on the hay and tramp it down.
How about downtown here? What kind of businesses did you frequent down here?
Well, let's see, there was Perkins had a store, had a shop.
What did they sell?
I think he was, what was he? He wasn't a blacksmith.
No, there was a blacksmith shop here, right in back of, well, where it
Tin
was.
shop, I think he had a tin shop.
Yeah, well, was it this place, I think that's why this got to be tin shop.
Yeah, but I think.
This was a
where,
tin shop at one time, but it may have been
I
before
don't
then.
remember, but I remember Perkins had a thing like that, and then, they had a number of different places around that. At one time, there was eight grocery stores, or stores you could buy in Bradford.
8.
I
Wow.
remember where the hotel is,
Mhm.
there was just this side, I remember a store over there,
Yeah,
and also we had a beauty shop there.
Oh.
And,
And the
one
cars.
time, my mother pushed me downtown, all the way from West Road, Dirt Road, in a baby carriage, and got her hair cut.
Wow.
And my dad was so furious, he didn't like short hair. But she did it anyway. And there was 2 stores across, one was,
cars,
car store, and there was one past that,
yeah,
and the blacksmith shop,
was in back,
Mr. Air
yeah,
had a blacksmith shop on the other side of the dam. You go by there now and you look,
you
how
can't
did
do
they
that.
have room for it?
Yeah, and Liam has a shop way back. This father had a little shop there, he did everything. He sold like chopping saws and, you know, that. And when I was 16, I was able to get a license. And so I went up to see Liam Perkins, his name
Yeah,
was.
Leon Perkins.
Yeah, and I went in and I said to Liam, how are you? What do you want? And I said, I came to get my license. And he said, well, GD, he says, no, you're too young to get married. I said, not my marriage. I want a driver's license. You haven't got a driver's license? I said, no. So they'd seen me driving for a number of years. I don't remember when I started to drive. And so anyhow, he says, well, you get down and get my mail, which was right at the damn store. You get down and get my mail for me, I'll have this all made up for you. I said, I get down, and that's where I get my license. So, we had a, The red front store was right here, there was a red front store, there was another store on the corner over there. Yeah, there was a store there. Then,
Mr. Nelson had a little
yeah,
store
right on the,
right by the railroad track.
right by the railroad tracks, the rowing pool, Delbert Nelson,
And Danforth.
yeah.
And,
And,